August 8th, 1963. Just after 3 a.m., a Royal Mail train hurtles through the English countryside. On board, over £2.5 million in cash, the equivalent of more than £50 million today. By sunrise, it would be gone. No guns fired, no one killed, just precision, planning, and one fatal mistake. This is the story of the greatest train robbery of all time. In the early 1960s, Britain was modernizing. Steam locomotives were giving way to diesel engines. Industry was booming, and every night, trains carried vast sums of money across the country. One train in particular stood out, the Glasgow to London Royal Mail Service. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't heavily guarded, but it carried cash, enormous quantities of it, collected from banks across Scotland and the north of England. Every night except Sundays, and on Fridays it carried even more. Why? Because it included weekend takings, the extra accumulation of business deposits waiting to be processed. To the right criminal mind, it wasn't just a train, it was a moving vault. Behind the plan was a seasoned criminal named Bruce Reynolds, charming, intelligent, and ambitious. Reynolds wasn't interested in petty theft. He wanted something legendary, something that would set him apart. He gathered a team of around 15 men, specialists in burglary, lockpicking, logistics, and getaway driving. Among them, Ronnie Biggs, Buster Edwards, Charlie Wilson, and several others with experience in high-stakes crime. This wasn't chaos, it was organized. They studied timetables, they calculated speeds, they memorized signal locations. And then they made a bold decision. They wouldn't rob the train at a station. They would stop it on open track. The gang identified a remote stretch of railway near Bridego Bridge in Buckinghamshire, isolated, dark, and perfect for an ambush. Their plan relied on one critical trick. Railway signals controlled train movement. A red signal meant stop. So the gang tampered with the line-side signals. They covered the green light and rigged a battery-powered red light. When the mail train approached at nearly 75 miles per hour, the driver saw red. He applied the brakes. The massive locomotive screeched to a halt, exactly where the gang wanted it. The robbers moved quickly. Wearing boiler suits and gloves, they boarded the engine. They struck the driver, Jack Mills, over the head, not fatally, but severely enough to incapacitate him. His co-driver was restrained. No firearms were used. This was about speed, not violence. The gang's original plan was simple: uncouple the high-value mail carriage and drive it to a waiting location. But there was a problem. None of them knew how to operate the newer diesel locomotive properly. They had recruited a retired train driver to help, but under pressure and in darkness, even he struggled. Minutes ticked by. Panic could have set in. Instead, they adapted. They forced the injured driver to move the train forward to Bridego Bridge. The heist continued. Inside the targeted carriage were 128 mail bags stuffed with cash, small denominations, used notes, untraceable currency. Exactly what criminals love. The gang formed a human chain. Bag after bag was thrown off the train and into waiting Land Rovers. They worked with astonishing efficiency. In just about 15 minutes, they cleared over £2.6 million. To put that into perspective, in 1963, the average annual wage in Britain was around £800. This wasn't just a robbery, it was the crime of the century. The gang escaped to a rented farmhouse called Leatherslade Farm, about 30 miles away. The plan was to lie low, split the money, disappear separately. Simple. But here is where brilliance gave way to arrogance. Instead of immediately scattering, the gang stayed together at the farmhouse for days. They played Monopoly using real stolen cash. They joked, they relaxed. They assumed they had executed the perfect crime. They were wrong. Police launched one of the largest investigations in British history. Scotland Yard assembled a special flying squad. They found the farmhouse. Inside, they discovered food packaging, bedding, tools, and most critically, fingerprints. The robbers had cleaned up, but not thoroughly. On a Monopoly board, on ketchup bottles, on surfaces throughout the house. In the early 1960s, forensic fingerprinting was highly advanced, and the criminals had left a trail. One by one, arrests began. Within months, most of the gang were caught. Some tried to flee abroad. Bruce Reynolds escaped to Mexico, then Canada. Ronnie Biggs fled to Australia, then Brazil. But many were captured quickly and brought to trial. The sentences shocked the nation. In 1964, several members received 30-year prison terms, unprecedented for non-violent robbery. The judge declared, "You have attacked the livelihood of the nation." Britain wanted an example made. But the story didn't end in prison. Charlie Wilson escaped from Winson Green Prison just 4 months into his sentence. Ronnie Biggs made a dramatic escape from Wandsworth Prison in 1965 by scaling a wall and dropping into a moving furniture van. He fled to Paris, changed his appearance, and eventually settled in Brazil, beyond extradition reach. For decades, Biggs became a celebrity fugitive. He gave interviews, appeared in media, lived openly. The robbery transformed from crime to legend. Despite the arrests, most of the stolen money was never recovered. Only a fraction was found. The rest vanished, spent, hidden, lost, or perhaps still buried somewhere. The missing millions only added to the mystique. It wasn't just bold, it was successful. Curiously, public opinion was divided. Some viewed the robbers as dangerous criminals. Others romanticized them as anti-establishment rebels, outsmarting institutions without firing a shot. It was the swinging 60s. Authority was being questioned, and the robbers became unlikely folk anti-heroes. Books were written, films were made, songs referenced the crime. But behind the myth were real consequences. Driver Jack Mills never fully recovered from the trauma. The crime wasn't victimless. So, why is this considered the greatest train robbery of all time? It wasn't the only train heist in history, but it was meticulously planned, incredibly daring, logistically complex, and financially massive. It exploited system weaknesses, outdated security, predictable schedules, minimal armed protection. And it happened at a moment in history when Britain was transitioning into modernity. It exposed vulnerabilities and changed how money was transported forever. After the robbery, security measures were drastically increased. The era of casually shipping millions by rail was over. Today, the Great Train Robbery remains one of the most studied crimes in modern British history. Not because of violence, but because of scale, audacity, and human error. It demonstrates something timeless about criminal ambition. The bigger the plan, the harder it is to escape the details. They stopped a speeding train. They stole millions.
They almost got away with it. Almost.
In the end, the greatest train robbery of all time wasn't just about money. It was about precision, about pride, about the thin line between genius and overconfidence, and a reminder that even the most perfect crime leaves a fingerprint.